this video begins, I'd like to show you a little lesson in how music can change a scene. We will see the exact same, and I mean exact same scene, twice, but with different music. Let's see how the scene changes when that little tiny aspect is differentiated.
Hey, Oliver, we need the film.
I can't do the Opinionist today.
It's due tomorrow.
Script. Fine. I guess I could find some time to do it.
I'll bet you could.
Come on, hurry up. You don't have all day.
True. Hey, Oliver, we need the film.
I can't do the Opinionist today.
It's due tomorrow.
Fine. I guess I could find some time to do it.
I'll bet you could.
Come on, hurry up. You don't have all day. Okay. Music. It's often what decides whether a scene is effective or not. If the music is awful, it will distract you and leave you with an unpleasant feeling in your game or movie or whatever it is. And as someone who has done some soundtrack work in the past, notably for the video game Radioactive Ham, it's not out yet, but when it does, make sure to buy it. You have to make the music align perfectly with the mood and dialogue of a scene. So today, we're going to look at some soundtracks that blow the whole ball out of the ballpark, and some ones that don't hit the ball with the bat. I've never played baseball, if you can tell.
Good soundtrack.
Why is everything upside down? Why, it's because we're in the upside down. Like from Stranger Things. Oh no! It's the Gorgonzola monster! He's gonna eat me! Somebody save me! Hey, 12, with your magical girl psychic powers, save me from the monster!
Come on, 12, do it!
Yeah, 12.
Ouch.
Okay, as you can see by that brilliantly crafted parody, this next part is gonna be about Stranger Things. Stranger Things, the 80s nostalgia fest that also functions as an excellent show in its own right, has one of the best scores on television, and it's actually what got me interested in film score in the first place. Stranger Things goes for a fuzzy, synth-filled, retro style that feels old, but also entirely fresh and new. Synthwave and 80s nostalgia in general might be a little cliche now, but Stranger Things brought it into the mainstream, and probably did it best.
Bad soundtrack.
On the other side of 80s synth stuff is the part where it stops being cool and retro and just ends up feeling dated and cheesy. Case in point, Lady Hawk. This is just the most, it's so cheesy, and it's like, did they know that they were making something dated? And now it's really all that this movie is known for. If they had stuck with a more fitting orchestral soundtrack, the movie would probably be held in a higher regard, but now really all anyone knows this movie Lady Hawk for is its awful, cheesy 80s synth sounds.
Good soundtrack.
Next up, for an actually good soundtrack, is any John Williams score, basically, except for the ones that nobody remembers. John Williams, if you don't know, is essentially the master of film music, and even if you don't know his name, you definitely know one of his themes. Here's a little sampling. You got the infamous and immediately striking Jaws theme. Dun dun, dun 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 dun. To the majesticness of the Jurassic Park. Da 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 da. Brings a tear to my eye. And then, of course, you have probably one of his most famous ones. Dun 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 dun. Star Wars. Dun 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 dun. And then, of course, you got the Indiana Jones.
Da 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 da
Da da da da da da. Indiana Jones. And from one of my personal favorite movies of all time, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, with that simple 5-note riff that ends up saving the world in the end. Da, 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 da. And the aliens go. Oh yeah! Ooh yeah! Ooh yeah! Ooh yeah! And even if the movie ends up awful, then the score will no doubt probably be decent at best. That's just the magic of John Williams. Oh, and he also did the Harry Potter theme. I've never watched those movies.
Bad soundtrack.
Next up is the soundtrack for the recent film Justice League. Probably one of the worst movies I've ever seen. And this is a case of the soundtrack not being outwardly bad. Like, you don't notice it at first, but then you realize it's so bland and boring and forgettable. The only memorable musical moments from it are the occasional bright spots of using Danny Elfman's old Batman theme. This is a case of a soundtrack just blatantly recycling everything to create a more memorable experience that it clearly cannot create on its own. It's one of the least creative and just most bland and forgettable soundtracks in recent memory.
Good soundtrack.
It's Sonic CD for the Sega CD, which is my all-time favorite soundtrack of all time. I'm not even joking, it's in the intro of this video. It's this brilliant mixture of like this 90s hyperactive dance and like 80s funk. It's so amazing. And yet they changed it for the American version, so only the Japanese and European version has the awesome synth funk stuff. So I think this is honestly one of my favorite soundtracks of all time, and I have a lot of nostalgic memories to it. Hit it, Johnny!
Sure thing, Ollie Buddy Pal. Oh, heck! I just died from erratically dancing to that awesome soundtrack!
Bad soundtrack.
Hey, did you lose something? Because the composers of the next game sure did.
Never mind.
Yeah, that's a joke. So the next soundtrack is for Sonic Chronicles, one of the worst Sonic games of all time. And to make matters worse, the entire soundtrack sounds like a 3-year-old pounding random keys on GarageBand. It is so irritating. It's like, why did they ever think this was a good idea? It's like, did a human being even make this? It is a disgrace to the entire Sonic soundtrack. Mostly because even if a Sonic game is bad, it usually has a decent soundtrack, or sometimes a really good one. But this one is just a bad game with an awful, awful soundtrack.
Good soundtrack.
Next up is a really good soundtrack for a really good movie called Inception. Inception is most famous for its extremely loud and incredibly epic, bro. Which you can hear a lot in modern movie trailers. It's the that seems to be used in every single movie advertisement ever. And although it caused somewhat of an annoying trend in soundtracks in general, and mostly in, of course, movie trailers, Inception actually has a really good and incredibly suspenseful soundtrack composed by the usually excellent Hans Zimmer, although he doesn't always hit the mark, as you'll see in the bad soundtrack counterpart to this. But I don't think Inception would be as popular or as famous without its bombastic score. With just a generic orchestral music, it would have probably been quickly forgotten.
Bad soundtrack.
Why, it's electro. From the hit film Amazing Spider-Man Dose.
I am the Green Goblin.
Oh no! It's Dane DeHaan, or whatever his name is. And it's Spider-Man!
I'm a climbing the wall.
Save us, Spider-Man, from this terrible, terrible movie. Do it! Do it! While awful soundtracks command you. Oh no. Spider-Man, do it! Here, let's play your heroic theme. Spider-Man, Spider-Man, Spider-Man. So, as you can see from our excellent reenactment of the entire plot of Spider-Man 2, I'm sorry, Amazing Spider-Man 2. These titles are
It's not as amazing.
Yeah, it's not amazing. Get it?
The mildly good Spider-Man 2.
It's not even mildly good, it's really bad. So, Amazing Spider-Man 2, as you know, ended the Amazing Spider-Man franchise and forced Sony to give up the right to Spider-Man to Marvel Studios, who created the actually really good Spider-Man Homecoming. One of the reasons that Amazing Spider-Man 2 was so bad was because of its cringe-worthy soundtrack. But first we need to take a look at who actually made this soundtrack. The one behind it all was the Hans Zimmer. You know, he made the Inception soundtrack, which I already mentioned. And Hans Zimmer has a pretty good track record. But he collaborated with, get ready for this, Pharrell Williams.
Bum, bum, bum.
The writer of Because I'm Happy from Despicable Me. Why? Why did he choose this person of all people? So the thing is, this soundtrack is just incredibly confusing. It utilizes dubstep, which is never a good sign, especially not for like a mainstream movie. I don't like dubstep, but I think anyone can agree, even dubstep fans, that the dubstep in this movie is like watered down version. It's like Pizza Hut dubstep, you know. And in addition to its cringy dubstep, it also has some really embarrassing vocal samples in its music, such as in one of the songs where it's supposed to be from the villain Electro, seen here.
Dude, it's Electro.
Electro's theme has a whispered voice sample that goes, he lied to me, he broken me, he hates on me, Spider-Man is my enemy. In addition, it uses that annoying Philip Phillips song, just "No, you're not alone. I'm gonna make this place your home." Oh well. So yeah, that's not actually an original song for the soundtrack, but anyway, it's still pretty bad. But yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 2. You definitely want to skip this one, and it's not just because of the overabundance of villains and terrible character writing, but also for the soundtrack.
Good soundtrack.
Action.
Okay, so next up on good soundtrack we have the Pokemon series, which is about Pokemon, the rich Italian plumber.
No! He's not Italian.
Okay, well, so in this game, Pokemon has to find all of the Pikachus.
No, you're getting it mixed up. It's you name your player, and then you have to find all the Pokemon.
Okay,
Pikachu
anyway,
is one of the
so the
Pokemon.
first Pokemon game that we're talking about is Pokemon Black and Yellow Edition.
Black and white.
Black and White. It was released on PlayStation 5.
No, it was released on the Nintendo DS.
Okay, well, if you know so much about it, then why don't you do this segment yourself, huh?
Yeah, gladly. Finally, my time to shine. Take the camera.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna copy you because that's cool. Pokemon Black and White has an exceptional soundtrack that is nearly perfect. While this may just be nostalgia talking, as I was going back through, I really think that it's one of the best soundtracks, at least one of the best Nintendo soundtracks. Maybe behind a few exceptional ones like Mario Odyssey and such. There's always a perfect mood, and I believe a really good example of this is Route 10. Route 10 is the last route of the game before you have to go through a grueling, tough, and dangerous environment. Route 10 is just this calm and mellow song that allows you to sort of get the peace. Understand you've gone a long way. You can just relax for a little bit, calm down, and then you're ready to go on through all these hardships.
Bad soundtrack.
Now for the bad soundtrack. It's the most recent Mega Man game, Mega Man 11. All of it just sounds like generic stock music. It's nothing like the Mega Man music that we were promised. An example would be the truly horrendous Bounce Man stage. So, what's your favorite soundtrack?
Oh, either Barney or Extreme Metal Deathmatch. The blood's so fun.
What's your favorite soundtrack?
My favorite soundtrack is the Zen life of the beautiful wind chimes in a beautiful green, full, pretty. The sounds are so calming to the soul.
So, what's your favorite soundtrack?
I like Riverdale. It's a really good soundtrack.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out my Best Soundtracks playlist on my personal channel, DJ Spoongoon, on YouTube. It's got about 36 of my favorite songs from TV shows, games, and movies. And if you like this video, I would definitely recommend it.